Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, social marketers from around the world. My name is Patrick Cook, and as the president of the International Social Marketing Association, as always, it's both my privilege and my pleasure to introduce the 33rd in a series of webinars designed to advance social marketing teaching, research, and practice. So today, I'm joined with Jay Kassir, Tamara Harbour, Stephanie Thomas, and Dave Cutter. Dave is our technical host for the webinar series. Tamara helped organize today's webinar, and she'll also be moderating. And Jay, of course, is our webinar manager. We'd like to begin in just a minute, but before we do, just a couple of quick announcements. As some of you know, we did an election for the International Social Marketing Association Board of Directors. And I wanted to introduce our newest board members. You should be seeing them here on your screen. We have Diogo Verciamo joining us, Kara Schulman, and Luca Ugazzoni. Diogo has joined us also as the new vice president, so he'll be giving us all, me in particular, a great hand, and Karis has joined us as our new treasurer. Also, just a couple of other announcements. We just finished our latest board meetings, and we'll have some more updates and announcements from that in the newsletter that will be coming out shortly. And just a reminder, I think some of you have been seeing these early promotions of it, but the World Social Marketing Conference is coming up in Edinburgh, Scotland in 2019 in early June. And the International Social Marketing Association will have several sessions there that we hope you will join us for. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jay Kassir. Jay, we're not quite hearing you. I'm wondering maybe if you could.
Thank you. Yes, I was forgetting to mute, of course. So we're going to start with this poll, if you don't mind, so we get a sense of where everyone is from. I'd appreciate it if you'd go ahead and fill out. I see most people from North America so far. We do have registrants from Europe and other places, but they may be in the afternoon. Well, I wouldn't think they'd be in the evening one. That'll be pretty late for them. Okay. Well, so far it looks like it's mostly from North America. And how did you hear about the webinar then? I'm assuming it'll be mostly ISMA and SMANA communications. ISMA newsletters, email, SMANA, yes, exactly. Okay, great. Thank you. I'd also like to remind you that if there's more than one of you at your location, we would appreciate it if you would let us know how many you are using the chat box. And please do ask questions using the chat text box as they come to you. Don't wait to the end of the talk. We'll answer your question at the end in roughly the same order as they come in during the webinar. And sometimes we can even give you some additional information while the webinar speaker is going on as well. So and we will have a poll at the end. We'd appreciate it if you'd stay on for that too, if you don't mind. And sorry, so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Tamara, who I believe is going to introduce our speakers for today. Tamara?
Hi, thanks, Jay. Yes, it's my pleasure to introduce Stephanie Thomas today. Stephanie likes taking really messy, complicated environmental challenges that include a lot of stakeholders and turning them into engaging and effective programs that generate solutions with real measurable results for her public and private sector clients, as you will see in today's webinar. Stephanie's passion for environmental challenges led her to take a BA with honors in environmental studies, environmental science, and resource management from the University of Washington, where she also served as chair of the university's Alumni Advisory Board for its program on the environment. Fast forwarding to the present, Stephanie is now Director of Education, Communication, and Outreach at Cascadia Consulting Group, where she leads a team of over a dozen sub-consultants on Seattle's Green Business Program. This program delivers targeted communications, marketing support, outreach, and technical assistance to thousands of Seattle businesses with the goal of saving water and energy, reducing waste, and preventing stormwater and wastewater pollution. Building on the success of the Seattle Green Business Program, Stephanie recently led an effort to help bring together individual green business programs across various Washington state cities, counties, and energy and water utilities under one umbrella program. And this involved facilitating a multi-stakeholder working group through the crucial planning and decision-making stages all the way to a final planning document that serves as a business plan and roadmap. These days, Stephanie is also overseeing the implementation and expansion of the statewide EnviroStars Green Business Program, and this also unifies business initiatives statewide in areas such as energy and water conservation, pollution prevention, green building, and reducing wastes, toxics, and greenhouse gas emissions. So clearly, Stephanie has wide-ranging experience in sustainability outreach and behavior change, and we are so fortunate to have her sharing her expertise and insights with us today. So with that, let's get started. Stephanie, over to you.
All right, thank you, Tamara, and thanks to the ISMA for the opportunity to speak with you all today. I'm super excited, and I hope you are too. So I'm going to cover some highlights from a social marketing campaign that we did along with our friends at C+C for our client, Seattle Public Utilities. So Seattle Public Utilities, or SPU as I'm going to say, is the utility that covers solid waste, drinking water, and drainage and wastewater services for the city of Seattle here in Washington state. So our goal with our campaign was to help residents in Seattle to stop flushing flushable wipes. Now, you guys on your computers and phones out there are not going to see me actually use air quotes when I say the words flushable wipes, but just know I'm using them throughout. All right, everyone, this is your official warning. We're going to look at some pretty gross pictures of local sewer pipes. So I know we have a lot of time zones represented today, and my apologies in advance for anyone who might be eating a meal right now as they tune in. All right, here is an outline of my talk today. So our campaign was, of course, built using the social marketing framework. Hopefully, I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't. When first we settled on trying to address the issue of people flushing flushable wipes because we were having so many issues with our local sewer systems. So we settled on that as our key issue, and then we started reviewing available data from SPU on the areas around the city with the most clogged pipes from flushable wipes and other trash being flushed down the toilets. We picked the neighborhoods with the worst offenders in the city, and we studied demographics in those neighborhoods to really drill down on our audience. We had some great target audience research that SBU had done with our local residents around the issue, and then we got to work crafting our pilot campaign to reach and engage them. So we started by developing specific messaging and strategies, and then we piloted those strategies, and then we evaluated them. And then we kind of found that we sort of failed miserably, actually, at changing behavior after that first round. So then we went back to our audience research, we refined our tactics, we piloted them some more, and then, well, I won't spoil the ending yet, but first I'll give you some more background. So the flushable wipe. It seems so innocent, and it sounds so flushable. I won't actually make you all respond using the poll function today, but how many of you out there think it's okay to flush these flushable wipes down the toilet? Spoiler alert, it's not. They actually belong in the trash. So why is the word flushable on the label? So I like to start by just addressing this question so you don't just sit there the whole time I'm talking thinking, why don't we just take the word flushable off the package? So lots of people are actually trying to do just that. This slide shows a timeline of some recent news articles. So starting a couple years back, public agencies brought legislation forward to actually ban the word flushable from the label for wipes. So we were super excited, yay. And really the issue has gained international attention and relevance as the issue sort of spread around the world. Here in the U.S., Washington, D.C. actually approved a bill to add labeling requirements to make it not possible to have that word flushable, since it actually causes so many problems. But then we heard from an industry group, and yes, there is actually an industry group just for wipes, the Association of Non-Woven Fabrics Industry. They're against labeling, and they deemed the DC bill unconstitutional. So now the fight over labeling of flushable wipes is actually headed to federal court, and we're making some progress, but it's complicated. So in the meantime, we have to get people to stop flushing wipes labeled flushable. And I have to keep using sarcastic air quotes when I talk about flushable wipes. We essentially have to use social marketing to solve a problem that traditional marketing has created. So part of the issue when we talk about this challenge is that most people, when they think of sewer pipes, this is the image they have in their mind. They think of this really big, clear, open sewer pipe system. Maybe you've seen a movie where people are going through the sewer systems. So it seems like you could flush anything down there, right? So what's the problem? Well, in reality, you then add some fats, oils, and grease, called fog for short in the industry, and then you get this. So fog makes its way into sewers when people scrape their plates and put food down sinks and garbage disposals, and it clogs pipes just like it clogs your arteries. So this has been a long-standing issue for utilities. Most folks are pretty familiar with fog being an issue. Well, then you add the increasingly popular flushable wipes, and you get a super cool new term, fatbergs. So this fun new term means a congealed lump of fat, wet wipes, sanitary napkins, and other things that don't flush down, that don't break down when you flush them, like toilet paper. So this is actually a picture of a recent fatberg in London. I'm sure many of you heard the story. It weighed over 130 tons, which is the weight of roughly 11 double-decker buses. It actually took an 8-person crew working on it 7 days a week, over 3 weeks to clear it. This is a photo that I struggle looking at sometimes. It's a photo of a brave utility worker in a river of fog and flush trash. A London company was quoted as saying that they deal with over 55,000 blockages a year from fog and flush trash. That costs over $1 million a month for maintenance staff and equipment. So a huge issue around the world. And here at home, we also have this issue. This is actually a photo that was sent to me by one of our Seattle Public Utilities clients. The first time I saw this photo, the first thing I thought was, A, gross, and then B, it's actually someone's job to help clear the trash we are flushing and to unclog these pipes. So then, of course, I thought, this is definitely going on the flyer. We actually did put that guy cleaning out gross stuff photo on the flyer that we used for our door-to-door outreach campaign to help educate residents on the issue. But before I get ahead of myself, I want to cover some of the research we did before we developed that great flyer with those disgusting photos. So the first step was really confirming our selected behavior and our priority audience. So here is an outline of the overall process that we took. So we partnered with C+C, a well-known social marketing firm here in Seattle that's just a block away from my office for this project. After sort of settling on our key knowledge objective, we reviewed available data from SPU on the trouble spots where that flush trash was accumulating in pump stations around the city due to those flushable wipes and other trash clogging pipes and causing huge labor and maintenance issues of our own. And in case you're not familiar, which I'm sure many of you probably are not tracking the infrastructure related to your sewer systems, so pump stations are facilities that include pumps and equipment for pumping fluids from one place to another. So after you flush your toilet to the eventual wastewater treatment facility in most systems. So we selected the specific neighborhoods that had the most maintenance issues and clogs in the city. And then we further reviewed audience research and all available data on those residents, and we got to work developing our specific marketing intervention plan. So our specific goal and sort of positioning statement was essentially to get residents to put disposal wipes in the garbage instead of flushing them, to avoid sewer backups at their home and their maintenance issues. So we weren't trying to get people to stop using flushable wipes, just to put them in the garbage instead of flushing them. So we tried to use the sort of foundation of social marketing best practices, developed those 4 Ps. The product we were trying to sell was less sewer backups in your home, and the sort of price and incentive piece was really wipes in the bin versus in your toilet helps prevent sewer overflows in your home. And then, of course, the sort of behavior, the place that we were targeting was people's restrooms, their actual bathroom behavior, which made for a super fun campaign and conversation. And then our promotional tactics, we really first looked at doing media and direct mail, and then also door-to-door. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. And then, of course, we developed our evaluation plan to measure the impact of the behavior change, which I'll also talk more about in just a minute. So that's the overview of our sort of overall process that we took to develop the campaign. For that initial research part, SPU sent a mailed survey to about 10,000 randomly selected Seattle households, and the survey was completed and sent back by about 1,500 respondents. So the topics that we covered in that survey were really, what products do consumers assume are safe to flush down the toilet? How regularly do they flush specific items like toilet paper, paper towels, tissue, toilet wipes, sanitary napkins, tampons, and why do they choose to flush those items? We asked about how similar or different flushing behaviors were in public restrooms versus at home. And then we also asked consumers how they determine what could or could not be flushed, and then what messages they thought might resonate or change behavior. We also asked about some demographic information and kind of best ways to communicate. So a pretty comprehensive survey with pretty good return results. And this survey showed that most people were most likely to think it was okay to flush facial tissues. And about a quarter of respondents said that they thought it was okay to flush wipes of any kind. So we chose to first focus on toilet wipes because they were a relatively new phenomenon. We know people have been flushing facial tissue for a while, and really wanted to start with like a targeted campaign related to wipes specifically. So after reviewing that initial survey data, we also decided to do some focus groups to dive a little deeper. So we did 3 focus groups as part of our audience research phase. One we did with female residents, one with male residents. As you could imagine, we didn't want to necessarily ask about tampon use and other personal hygiene product use. We thought it makes sense to separate those groups. And then we also had a separate focus group with custodians who worked across different local businesses and for different contractors to really get a deeper sense of people's restroom behavior and effective approaches and messages. So these are some of the findings that came out of that focus group. I think many of them are sort of intuitive, but generally speaking, people flush trash because they didn't want it in their bathroom. They wanted it to go away. They were flushing flushable wipes because the package said so, and that makes sense, right? We can't fault them for that. The respondents mentioned they wanted a simple message indicating what is safe to flush. They actually didn't want to hear too much about what wasn't okay to flush. They wanted to focus first on what is safe to flush. And then they also wanted us to prove that items are not safe to flush. They mentioned that motivators for adopting a different behavior were preventing sewage backups and clogs. So that was sort of what we wanted to lead with. So we're armed with our findings from our surveys and our focus groups, and we had begun work to sort of fine-tune our messaging and different engagement strategies. The Cascadia and CPOCIM developed an outreach plan first, which outlined our overall campaign messaging and potential communication strategies before we began our direct engagement work. So in addition to the outreach plan, we developed a specific message map and kind of overall campaign theme. We wanted to cover potential messaging for both residential and commercial audiences in our message map because we wanted to reach every home and every business that was connected to the sewer system and the pump station and those areas with the most trash accumulation. And then we sort of settled on this as our primary message of the campaign. So toilet paper is the only item that is safe to flush, and everything else belongs in the trash. So we use that key message and the audience research findings to create a suite of marketing and outreach tools to help promote the campaign and educate both businesses and residents. So the toolkit includes, for the residential side, door hangers and flyers and information, a little bit on the why, but mostly on the what to do. And then our commercial suite of materials also included information for educating staff and things like toilet tank stickers and signage to go directly in individual restroom stalls. So we also had a chance to refine and add to this toolkit over time based on the feedback that we got from businesses. For example, some businesses we spoke to were pretty darn particular about the look of their restrooms and wanted restroom stall signage that would fit with their overall aesthetic. So we actually made like a laminated silver-toned version that was pretty popular. So we incorporated feedback as we went. Now that we had our sort of campaign messaging and materials ready to go, we wanted to further refine our target audience and the specific strategies we're going to use to reach this audience. So the utility does have some methods for identifying specific homes and businesses that are contributing to the overall problem of flushing trash by looking at video of side sewers and some of them the side sewers that connect to individual properties to the main public sewer system. But in general, we actually don't know who exactly is contributing to the problem in a particular neighborhood. So when we received that data from the utility around the pump stations with the most issues, we saw that they were mostly in residential areas with just a handful of businesses. And we also noted that those residents were in sort of higher income household and areas of the city with higher valued homes, which was actually consistent with the initial survey demographic research that showed that people who were more likely to even purchase wipes tended to be more affluent members of the community. And those were also typically the homes that had more issues with fats, oils, and grease flushed down the system as well. So we finally settled on one particular neighborhood to kick off our pilot campaign. We were ready to launch our pilot. We decided to make this like a commercial and residential focused outreach campaign with 3 primary engagement tactics. So mailers, digital social media ads, and then door-to-door outreach. We wanted to launch that direct mail and social media elements of our campaign before starting our door-to-door outreach and see if we could sort of measure change without having to commit to that on-site work, given it can be a fairly labor-intensive strategy. So we settled on these specific strategies for our pilot in this particular order. So we started by sending a residential mailer showing the key message that only toilet paper was safe to flush. We created some Facebook ads showing the overall maintenance issues and potential clogs that happened at the pump station level, and then provided some info about how pump station clogs can lead to clogs at your home, which nobody wants. We also placed an ad in a local popular parenting magazine to ensure we were reaching parents with small children that might be using and flushing wipes and potentially diapers. And then we also conducted outreach to our local businesses who sold wipes to residents in the neighborhood we were targeting. So we posted signage and those businesses' restroom stalls, and we were also actually able to get one grocer to add shelf talkers on their actual wipes display, so at the point of sale, to show residents that they should put those in the trash. So that all sounds pretty creative and thoughtful, right? Hopefully you guys are thinking that all sounds really good. We were going to reach these audiences in a variety of ways, and we were going to measure the impact of each strategy. We also conveniently, through this campaign, had a really awesome and effective campaign evaluation tactic. So we were going to be able to have local pump station crews actually collect and weigh the amount of trash that was collected at the pump stations in the neighborhoods that we were targeting. So this is actually a graph that shows the weights of trash pulled by those utility maintenance crews at the pump station in the neighborhood where we did our pilot outreach. So we were able to measure the impact of each stage of the campaign. When we first sent that mailer to residents, when we did some outreach to local businesses, when we created that Facebook ad showing the scale of the maintenance issues. And here are the results. As you can see, there was actually no measurable change or reduction in the weight of trash flushed down toilets. It actually sort of looked like the weights went up, which was not super encouraging for the team. While also not entirely surprising, given that we know, I think we all know, the impact of sort of the mailer and social media ads in terms of changing behavior as a standalone tactic. But it was clear that our message was not getting through with these particular tactics. Now, here's another really local, gross photo to look at while I give you my confession. So I was once part of the problem. More than once, I would clean the rim of my toilet seat with a paper towel or a cleaning wipe, and I would throw it in the bowl, and I would flush it, and I didn't look back. And again, I won't use our poll function to actually see how many of you have done that too, but you know who you are. So I was part of the problem, and for me, finding a solution to this issue was really personal. Now, we had clogged pipes, and we knew that people didn't want to back up at their home, and we knew that people didn't want their poor utility workers to deal with clogs, but we really wanted to focus on why really should they care. Well, sometimes when it rains really hard, which it doesn't rain really hard very often in Seattle, but it sure does rain a lot, when it rains really hard or there's a lot of rain and there's already lots of clogs and trash in the wastewater system, stormwater can mix with wastewater and you get what's called a combined sewer overflow. It's a technical term that means what you fear it does, that this flush trash can overflow into our stormwater system and then directly into local lakes and rivers and streams. So this photo at the top shows another brave SPU staff worker cleaning some flushable wipes out of Lake Washington after an overflow. I just want to pause and ask if you've ever thanked your local utility workers recently. So the first time I saw this photo, I thought, of course, gross. And then the second thing I thought was, we've got to put that on a flyer too. Specifically, we put it on a door hanger that we were going to use and leave on the doors of everyone in this specific neighborhood that we couldn't talk to in person. So the lake and place this photo was taken was actually in the neighborhood that we selected for our door-to-door pilot outreach campaign. So there's actually a home in this photo that you can see that's actually one of the homes that we end up reaching through the campaign. So we really chose an image and an issue that was, you couldn't say it wasn't in your backyard. It was literally in their backyard. And Lake Washington is a big and popular lake, and lots of local families, including the residents in this area, routinely swim in the lake. So we were armed with some disgusting photos and a deep desire to change behavior for good, but we were still struggling with how exactly you explain that toilet paper is fine to flush, but that these wipes, which seem so similar, can ruin a utility worker's day and maybe end up in your local favorite watering hole. So we really looked back at our target audience research findings from those focus groups and saw that we hadn't really addressed the feedback that the respondents said they wanted proof on what was safe to flush. My aha moment for this campaign came when I was venturing over to my colleague's desk to talk about our campaign outreach plan. So I'm chatting with her, and I look over at her windowsill, and I see one of our drinking glasses with a flushable wipe floating in it. And I asked her, is that a flushable wipe? How long has it been there? And her response was, I don't know, like a few weeks. And it hit me just then that wipes don't break down, that is specifically what we need to show the people. So we did. So we actually decided that the fact that toilet paper is made to dissolve and flushable wipes and paper towels and tissues are meant to be super durable, that we really needed to really drill down on that specific message with a very clear visual. So we decided to retool our main social marketing ads to supplement our door-to-door outreach and really focus on that specific message. We created this short new video to include in our social media campaign aimed at those area residents. And the ads featuring this video actually had the highest level of engagement the utility had seen. People were genuinely just very surprised and did not really fully realize. And that visual really helped to drill down and drive that message home. So we also decided to bring small plastic jars along during our outreach to show both toilet paper and a flushable wipe suspended in water and show that proof of how one breaks down and one doesn't. We then outfitted our outreach staff with those bright, lovely orange utility branded vests, and we hit the streets armed with our jars of wipes and toilet paper and gross photos. And the message was really simple. Wipes shouldn't be flushed down the toilet. They don't break down. Put them in the trash. We also decided, as we sort of refined the campaign and our overall approach, that we wanted to be able to offer a specific incentive tied directly to that behavior we wanted residents to adopt. So we know most people have some sort of waste bin in their restroom, but for anyone that doesn't, anything they are using around the toilet could end up in there. We also heard from people that they thought that some of these materials were gross and they wanted a bin with a lid specifically. So we wanted to tie the ask of putting wipes into the trash instead of the toilet to a specific visual reminder, and we began offering these free lidded bins to residents in select neighborhoods. We also incorporated a pledge to put the wipes in this specific bin in our outreach messaging at the end of our interaction with the residents. So to track our interactions, we actually used a mobile and phone and tablet app called Spotio. We noted for each home that we went to in our target area if the resident was home when we visited them, if our outreach staff were able to have a direct interaction with the resident. We also noted if they distributed a free trash bin. And then we also noted if the resident was not home and instead received that door hanger with that lovely picture of wipes ending up in the lake, so that we could evaluate the difference between a direct interaction where we actually were able to speak with a resident, and then if they just received the information via the door hanger. So we continue to have SPU maintenance staff weigh the trash that was clogging pipes in our pilot neighborhood over the course of our entire campaign. So this is that same graph that we looked at earlier, showing the weight of trash at the pump station where we did our outreach, extended out to include that door-to-door campaign, armed with our jars of wipes and toilet paper, our wipes behind your house in Lake Washington door hanger, and those new Facebook ads showing the shaking jars. And it's worked. That's the actual measurements of the weight of trash pulled from that pump station after we completed our behavior change campaign in the neighborhood. It was actually 0 at the end of the door-to-door outreach campaign. So unfortunately, SPU did some maintenance upgrades shortly after the campaign, and we can no longer measure weights at that particular site to see if it was sustained. But for a brief moment in time, we felt we had changed the world for the better and really started asking ourselves if it was time to hang up our spurs after that. So while we were very excited about the results of that campaign pilot, we realized we would need to continue to refine our strategy to sort of scale the campaign for broader city adoption. And it was clear from our interactions with residents that more information was needed to actually change behavior overall across the city. We actually had one resident say to one of our door-to-door outreach staff that they really appreciated that we were out in the neighborhood providing this helpful information, but that we shouldn't worry because she got her flushable wipes from Costco, which is a local retailer, and so she assured us that they were actually flushable. So she went through our whole spiel and then actually was like, oh yes, thank you for the information, that's helpful, but don't worry, my wipes are actually flushable. So sadly, our work was not done. And we can't ride off into the sunset just yet. Our client, shortly after we wrapped up our campaign in that one neighborhood, sent along this photo from the wastewater treatment facility where all of our local sewer material goes to for treatment. It's a giant pile of tampon applicators and condoms and other trash that's pulled out of the system at the treatment plant in Seattle, which is sort of the end of the line for the trash that's flushed through our sewer system. So there's literally a mountain of other things that we need to get people to stop flushing down the toilet. So as we looked to expand our pilot, we knew that we had to develop a different method of measurement since we couldn't count on weighing those rags anymore. That process is not available in all pump stations. And of course, measurement is very important to us. So we then developed a pre and post outreach evaluation survey that we've been mailing to residents a month before and then 3 months after our evaluation and outreach to measure that change in behavior related to flushing those specific items. So in follow-up outreach in different neighborhoods where we were continuing to refine our pilot, we were able to see a measurable decrease in the flushing of personal and baby wipes. Yay, that was the focus of our campaign. But what we didn't see was a reduction in the other key items that we didn't emphasize with our visuals, including those tissues and tampons. So you'll see here that there was actually a change in behavior in the flushing of the wipes and not a change necessarily, measurable change in the flushing of those other items. So our key takeaway here was that it really is important that our visuals, that proof that those residents needed to see, addressed those items as well. So this is sort of a summary of lessons learned that we've been taking into the expansion of our pilot. We wanted to continue using door-to-door outreach. Campaign participants were actually really positive about having us show up at their house and ask questions about what they were flushing down the toilet. We weren't exactly sure how residents would take it, but they generally were pretty positive and pretty supportive. We also really want to continue to use social media as a pretty cost-effective and targeted approach to reach our priority audience and those specific zip codes that we're targeting. We really feel like it's important to pair those strategies for greater impact. And as we wanted to use our new evaluation method of pre and post outreach surveys to gauge impact. And then we also wanted to keep that giant pile of trash that we just saw in mind. We saw wipes, but we also saw those tampons and tampon applicators and wanted to make sure our expanded pilot would help address those. So our next stage and our next phase for this is that we, in 2018, have planned to complete an expanded pilot campaign focusing on priority audience groups that we thought might be flushing those trouble items like wipes and diapers and tampons. We settled on these for potential high-impact groups to conduct some more audience research. So we chose aging populations that are living in retirement communities that use wipes and adult incontinence products. We also wanted to do more research on college-age women that use tampons and other feminine hygiene products. We surveyed childcare facilities that accept children in diapers and have staff that change diapers and use baby wipes. And then we also wanted to talk with gastroenterology clinics that perform these colonoscopies and provide patients with information and instructing them to use personal wipes at home or as part of the colonoscopy prep and recovery process. So those were the groups that we decided to include in our follow-up research before we expand our pilot. And of course, we know that we wanted to do new target audience research with these groups before diving into an expanded pilot. It had been a few years since we had last done our audience survey work. So our 2018 work began with a baseline research survey to select the target audience for the expanded pilot from these groups. So our goal was really to look at potentially one or two. And then we would refine and implement and evaluate an expanded pilot campaign with the goal to create that measurable behavior change with these other groups. We used different contacts and research methods for each of these priority audience groups, knowing that they all receive information in different ways. We used a combination of phone and in-person interviews, paper surveys, and online surveys to get about 400 responses from these different groups. And then we did some analysis on the responses for each of these groups. So we wanted to rate them first on potential impact. What was the total number of products that they were incorrectly flushing to get a sense of the overall potential impact of reaching and engaging that group on a broader scale. So we used survey responses and then modeled data on the total number of audience members throughout the city. And then we added up all the stuff that they told us they were flushing incorrectly in their survey responses to give us this sort of tally per audience. So here you can see that seniors and college-age residents are flushing a lot of stuff incorrectly. And then we also wanted to look at relative access and kind of audience size as factors where we would be narrowing down the priority audience for our expanded pilot. So to determine that kind of access piece, we looked at basically how responsive was each group to our requests for surveys and interviews. I'm not sure how many of you have ever tried contacting gastroenterologists when you don't have a specific problem. For the record, I'm sure they are probably more responsive to actual potential patients, but they were not super interested in talking to us about what they tell patients about flushing wipes. So we use that overall sort of access to gauge how successful our campaign might be at reaching those audiences and how responsive they might be to our surveys, and then decided that we would settle in on both college-age students and seniors living independently for our next phase. So as part of that follow-up research, we also found that after that latest round of surveys, we were able to see that, guess what? Wipes, facial tissues, and tampons were still the most commonly flushed items. So we had now settled on wipes and facial tissues as the focus of our expanded pilot that we're going to launch in this next phase. Back to the flushable wipe. So our updated research shows that this is still the biggest issue to tackle in our expanded pilot, but we now know that with all those lessons learned and refined tactics that were rooted in social marketing, that with the right message and the right visual and the right messenger, we can actually change people's behavior for good. Thank you so much.
And thank you so much, Stephanie. I'm not sure I'm being heard. Could somebody let me know if they're hearing me?
Yes, Tamara, we can hear you.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you so much. I had some technical problems here. Lost my network connection. The power flickered on and off. Okay, we do have some questions for you. Thank you so much for that. It's been really, really interesting, and I've certainly learned a lot, and the visuals are extremely helpful, so I can certainly see why you chose to use those for your for all your materials, because one picture is worth 1,000 words. We have a question from Brian, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your last name, Berosak. For those of us using social marketing to address a problem created by commercial marketing, he's asking, did you consider working with the marketers of the wipes so that it would be a win-win solution? Was that an option? Is that something you tried before any other thing that you tried?
Yes, that's a great question, and definitely a really helpful tactic if you can have them help with that heavy lift of reaching people. We did have some early conversations with both manufacturers and then also local distributors and retailers, and what we found in general was that they were not super receptive to any messaging that had sort of a negative connotation with the product. It's become a huge industry, a multi-billion-dollar industry, and they really were not interested in partnering on messaging that might sway people away from using the product or that had any kind of negative connotation. But that's not to say it couldn't be an effective strategy for other types of products.
And Brian is asking as well if you could repeat the name of the app you use to track interventions. Is it a free app? Is that the Spotio one?
Spotio, S-P-O-T-I-O.
Okay.
There is a cost, but it's very, very cost-effective and a pretty cheap mobile app to use.
And can you say a little bit more about how it helped you?
Yeah, so it was actually, it's a map-based app that you just basically load your addresses, and then outreach staff that are out in the field can use tablets or mobile phones to select specific pins or homes or addresses, and then quickly add information on the interaction from some pre-populated fields. So there are lots of other sort of similar apps and strategies you can use. I think the most important thing is just to have a really easy way for your field staff to be able to provide those responses so that we can kind of aggregate that data and then again track how effective the outreach was, and for those residents who we had a direct interaction with versus those where we just left information.
Okay. And Patrick Cook has a follow-up question to Brian's first question, which is, why is the industry reluctant to remove the word flushable from their product naming? There must be something in it for them to keep that attribute.
So that's also a great question. I think it really does get down to the use. That most residents and the public who are interested in using those products like the fact that it's gone when they're done, that they don't have to have that material left in a bin that they then have to deal with. So it really was, I think we also have seen that there's a huge prevalence of lots of other types of wipes, so cleaning wipes in the home, and baby wipes and other wipes that don't actually use the word flushable, but because of that use of the word flushable, and now everyone sort of assumes that all wipes are flushable, even if they're not labeled that.
So obviously it's the convenience factor for people, and it's a mindset that, that they're obviously benefiting from having the word flushable on there. So again, staying with that theme of maybe trying to get the word flushable taken off the packaging, have you tried other routes, like maybe working with local groups to try and get the word flushable taken off the packaging?
Yes, so there definitely is, in addition to that sort of national effort, there are local efforts. Our SPU client who helped work on this campaign actually went to our state legislator and gave a presentation, and she brought those jars that we used during outreach and was able to show the group that actually these jars, which our outreach team had been using for months out in the field, that you could still see the wipe was completely intact. So she actually brought those jars and used that tactic to help work with our local government as well. But that really resulted in just overall trying to sign on to those broader national efforts.
And would you say that was successful?
I think it was definitely successful in conveying the sort of scale of the issue. And then our local social marketing association is working to kind of use this as a case study to put some information on the impact of social marketing. And that's actually going to be at a display at our Capitol building.
Okay, so that's in progress then, still being worked on. Patrick
Indeed.
Cook has another follow-up question. He says, if you were asked by policymakers at the state or national level to recommend a policy solution, what would be your preferred policy solution?
Great question. I do think overall just removing the word flushable as a claim that is not true, and just really taking that word off packaging would help make all of our jobs a lot easier, because again, that's the first thing people ask, well, like, why does it say flushable then? So even the most well-designed social marketing campaign, it's hard to compete with seeing that word on packaging. So that would be my top recommendation.
Right. So it seems to me you're actually doing a bit of a two-prong approach. You're looking at upstream social marketing to, at the policy level, at the the level of the marketers who are putting the word flushable on the packaging, and then also you have to go downstream with the people who are actually using the wipes. It's like you're going at it from both ends, it seems.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. And looking at it from practical place, when you're doing your on-site door-to-door outreach, that can be expensive, an expensive campaign engagement strategy. So do you have any suggestions for how making that as cost-effective as possible, or a more cost-effective approach?
So I certainly do think that the standalone tactics of, I know everyone's sort of feeling unsure about social marketing, of social media, I should say, advertising, but using social media and just really that clear visual of those shaking jars, the fact that you can, boost those messages to specific zip codes, that is, I think, a standalone tactic that could be really effective if you can't get out there and go in the field and reinforce that with that door-to-door outreach. But I'm sure many other people have also found, university students or local volunteers, other sort of lower cost labor that might be enthusiastic about helping spread the word.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and Jay has a follow-up question, a question about the midstream correction that you made. What would be your main takeaway that you would offer our participants listening today regarding making midstream corrections?
I think it's really just that basic thing which we all know we should do but find it hard to do somehow when you're launching a campaign, is really to design your evaluation method to allow the opportunity to measure throughout the course. I think a lot of us have an evaluation tactic that includes maybe a survey at the end of the campaign, and so you don't necessarily get that same ability to gather that data throughout the process. So really being able to develop an evaluation tactic that gets you that information as quickly as possible so that you can sort of refine your tactic and address that, I think that's the biggest, most helpful piece.
Right, just making that part of the design of how you're implementing the campaign.
Right.
Okay. And Jay is also asking, what helped you respond so well?
To the issue, or
I
to
think
the...
she actually just answered that for us.
She did? Okay.
She was able to respond so well because she was tracking.
That's
right, and I thought you might have also been asking about the kind of resources that she had, because this
well, sure, maybe there's some other parts to that too.
Yeah.
What else can we learn about setting ourselves up to be able to respond well in situations like that?
Yeah, I think that was another good reminder for us when we were thinking through that messaging, like, okay, so we're not quite getting the results that we want. What next? What should we try next? We sort of had to, again, pause and remind ourselves that we had this great research and data, and when we looked back at our lovely summary report of that audience research and saw that, one of those bullets was prove it to us. Show us exactly what the problem is and why. That helped us, remember that we had been thinking we would show more system impacts, but what people really needed to see in this case was just the proof that toilet paper breaks down and that wipes don't. And so just kind of going back to the basics and making sure that you've covered all those pieces of information that you gather at that audience research phase.
And just one last quick question. Given the kind of topic that you were working with, did you get any negative feedback from customers because you had to ask them about their behaviors, like that, questions related to their bathroom behaviors?
You know, we were so ready for that. We had lots of training with our team, and we had scripts and scenarios and role plays, and we really thought we were going to get someone to say, like, are you really knocking on my door and asking me about what I'm flushing? And we just didn't. We definitely had some people say, I'm sorry, you're with who? And what? What are you asking me about today? Just kind of like a little bit surprised that we were knocking on their door and asking them about their bathroom behavior. But overall, I think there was just such an appetite for information and such a, you know, they just really weren't aware of the problem. And so I think we were able to win them over with just providing that information.
Great. Well, thank you, Stephanie. You certainly won us over with all your information and showing us how to handle midstream course corrections and how to evaluate for that, and also just the topic itself. I've certainly learned a lot, and I'm sure all our participants today learned a lot too. So thank you so much for all the time and effort you've put into this. It was so clear and easy to understand, and I'm just grateful as somebody who's concerned about the environment that you're tackling this issue, and I'm sort of wishing other places would tackle it as well. So thank you very, very much for all your expertise and insight, and I will hand over the rest of the webinar to Jay.
Thank you, Tamara, and thank you, Stephanie. I'd like to thank as well the participants in today's webinar. As you leave the webinar, you'll be offered the opportunity to fill out a short evaluation form. And we do depend on your answers to when we're planning our next webinars. So even if you've been to some before, just let us know what's working or what's not working with this one. Very briefly, we don't need a lot, and it does help us, please. Upcoming, don't forget to check our events calendar. There's lots of upcoming events. The DC Behavior, Energy, and Climate Change Conference meeting. There will be conferences in the UK and in Australia. And unfortunately, we do not have at this time the title and time for our next webinar, which is roughly 2 months from now at the end of November. We hope to have that information to you soon in 2 ways. You will be able to get it. One, of course, you can check our website, but we will also send you an email to let you know that registration is open as soon as we have it up. So please keep your eyes open for that as well. I'd like to give thanks to Dave Cutter for handling the technical aspects of today's webinar, to Tamara for helping organize the session, and at this point, I'd like to turn it back over to Patrick.
Great. Thanks very much, Jay, and thank you, everyone. I'd just like to echo Jay's thanks to Dave, to Tamara, and particularly to Stephanie. It was a really excellent presentation, and you too learned a lot, probably more than I ever thought I would. I also really want to extend a thank you and just express my great gratitude for the members and participants who joined us on today's webinar. Your participation and continued support really does mean a lot to us, and it keeps these webinars going. As Jay said, we'll be having another webinar in a couple of months, and we'll keep you posted on the topic and the timing of that. But until then, keep visiting us at the ISMA website. Don't forget to share your events on the calendar, and we'll share more information with upcoming events, outcome of board meetings, and all of that great stuff. So once again, thank you, everyone. This is the International Social Marketing Association, and we now conclude today's webinar.